Jake Morrison walked into the massive council chamber for what he knew would be the last time. The room stretched out before him like a giant arena, with seats rising in circles around the center floor. Hundreds of alien beings filled those seats, their strange voices creating a constant buzz of noise that hurt his ears. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 12 years. 12 long years of watching his people get pushed around, ignored, and treated like children. Today, that would end. The Zephyrian delegate stood at the main podium, his crystal body catching the light as he waved his arms. Veltar was his name, and he loved to remind everyone how much smarter his people were than humans. His voice rang out across the chamber like breaking glass. "The human proposal is ridiculous," Veltar announced. "They want equal voting rights for their colonies. They want fair trade agreements. They even want representation on the military council. These demands show how little humans understand about running a galaxy." Jake felt his jaw tighten. Human colonies produced more food than any other species in the galaxy. Human doctors kept alien populations healthy. Human engineers built the power plants that kept their cities running. Human soldiers died protecting alien worlds from pirates and invaders. But somehow, humans were still treated like the new kids. In school, Lieutenant Casey Brooks leaned over and whispered in Jake's ear, "Sir, the intelligence report just came in. The hegemony is blocking our trade ships again, 3rd time this month. But they still want our military to protect their outer colonies from raiders." Jake nodded but said nothing. He watched as delegate after delegate stood up to speak against the human proposals. The Corvin representative complained that humans expanded too fast. The Centaurian ambassador said humans were too violent. The Aquatic Coalition worried that humans would pollute their water worlds. Every criticism was the same. Humans were too young, too primitive, too dangerous to have real power in the galaxy. But when pirates attacked, who did they call? When diseases spread, who found the cure? When power plants failed, who fixed them? Always humans. General Patricia Hayes sat in the military section, her uniform crisp and her face calm. Jake caught her eye and saw the same frustration he felt. Patricia had commanded joint alien-human forces for 8 years. She knew better than anyone how much the other species relied on human tactics, human weapons, and human courage. But in these chambers, her voice carried no weight. Dr. Amanda Foster sat with the science advisors, her tablet full of research that could revolutionize galactic medicine. Her work on quantum healing had already saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds. But when she tried to present her findings, the alien scientists dismissed her as an amateur. They said humans thought too simply, that their science lacked sophistication. Jake remembered his first day in this chamber 12 years ago. He had been so hopeful then. Earth had just made contact with galactic civilization, and humanity was eager to join the community of spacefaring species. The other delegates had welcomed them with smiles and promises of friendship. Those promises had turned out to be lies. The council voted on human proposals exactly the way they always did. Proposal after proposal was rejected by overwhelming margins. Fair trade agreements? Denied. Equal representation? Refused. Military cooperation treaties? Postponed indefinitely. Meanwhile, the requests for human help never stopped. The Zephyrians needed human engineers to run their fusion reactors because their own people could not handle the complex systems. The hegemony wanted human doctors to staff their hospitals because alien medicine could not match human surgical techniques. The Corvin Empire demanded human military advisors to train their forces because their ancient combat methods were useless against modern pirates. Jake pulled out his communication device and sent a coded message to Admiral Lisa Grant, who waited in orbit aboard the space station Hope. The message was simple. Protocol 7, execute immediately. He stood up slowly and walked to the speaker's platform. The chamber fell quiet as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward him. Some looked curious, others annoyed that a human would interrupt their important discussions. "Honored delegates," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system. "For 57 years, humanity has served this council. We have given our technology freely. We have shared our medical knowledge. We have sent our soldiers to die for worlds we had never seen, protecting people who did not want us as neighbors." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates looked uncomfortable. "We built the quantum communication network that connects your worlds. We designed the fusion reactors that power your cities. We trained your doctors in surgical techniques that cut your mortality rates in half. We taught your military forces how to fight against modern weapons and tactics." Jake paused and looked around the chamber. He saw fear starting to appear on some faces. They were beginning to understand what he was really saying. "In return, you have treated us like servants. Our proposals are rejected without discussion. Our colonies are denied basic rights. Our trade ships are blocked and harassed. Our people are called primitive and dangerous." Veltar stood up, his crystal body shimmering with agitation. "Ambassador Morrison, what is the purpose of this speech? Do you have new proposals to present?" Jake smiled for the first time in months. "No, Veltar. I have an announcement. As of this moment, humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. We are recalling all human personnel from Council worlds. We are shutting down all human-operated facilities and systems. We are ending all military cooperation agreements." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates jumped to their feet, shouting in dozens of languages. The sound was deafening. "You cannot do this!" Veltar screamed over the noise. "The Council will not allow it." "The Council has no authority over humanity anymore," Jake replied calmly. "We tried to be partners. You made it clear that you see us as servants. Servants can quit." The hegemony delegate, a massive insectoid creature named Thixnar, pushed forward. "This is madness. Who will maintain the fusion reactors? Who will staff the hospitals? Who will protect our trade routes?" "That is no longer our problem," Jake said. "You have spent decades telling us how primitive and useless we are. Now you can prove how much better you are without us." Casey Brooks appeared at Jake's side, along with the other human delegates and advisors. They formed a small group in the center of the chaotic chamber. "The evacuation ships are already in position," Casey reported quietly. "Admiral Grant confirms that all human personnel are being extracted from Council facilities. The shutdown of human-operated systems will begin within the hour." Jake nodded and turned back to the alien delegates. They were still shouting, still demanding that humanity reconsider. Some threatened economic sanctions. Others promised military action. A few even offered to discuss minor improvements to human status in the Council. "Too late," Jake said simply. "You had 57 years to treat us as equals. You chose not to. Now live with that choice." He turned and walked toward the chamber exit, followed by every human in the room. Behind them, the shouting grew louder and more desperate. Jake did not look back. As they reached the exit, Patricia Hayes caught up with him. "Jake, they're going to realize very quickly how much they need us. When they do, they'll come begging." "Yes," Jake agreed. "And when that happens, we'll be ready to discuss terms. Real terms this time. Terms between equals." The massive doors of the council chamber closed behind them with a sound like thunder. For the first time in 12 years, Jake Morrison felt free. Captain Ryan Clark stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching his tactical display light up with hundreds of green dots. Each dot represented a human ship emerging from hyperspace around different council worlds. The largest evacuation in human history had begun. "All ships report ready status," his communications officer announced. "Fleet Admiral Grant confirms Protocol 7 is active across all sectors." Ryan had commanded evacuation missions before, but nothing like this. His fleet alone was responsible for extracting 12,000 human personnel from the Zephyrian home system. Other fleets were doing the same thing at 17 different star systems simultaneously. The Zephyrian orbital control tower was already sending frantic messages. UES Defiance, you do not have permission to deploy this many ships in our system. Explain your intentions immediately. Ryan opened a channel to the surface. Zephyrian Control, this is Captain Clark. We are conducting a scheduled evacuation of all human personnel and equipment from your worlds. We will be gone within 72 hours. Evacuation? What evacuation? We received no notification of this. Check with your council representatives, Ryan replied, then cut the channel. He turned to his first officer. Begin extraction operations. Military personnel first, then civilians, then equipment. Everything comes home. On the planet below, Dr. Amanda Foster was packing her laboratory with desperate speed. Her research team moved through the facility like a well-trained unit, collecting data cores, dismantling quantum computers, and wiping every trace of their work. Doctor, the transport ships are landing now, her assistant called out. We have 2 hours before departure. Amanda looked around her lab one last time. This was where she had developed the quantum healing technology that revolutionized galactic medicine. The aliens had always called her work interesting but primitive. Now they would discover just how primitive their own medicine really was. She activated the final deletion protocol on her main computer. Years of research vanished in seconds. The backup files were already loaded onto the transport ships, but nothing would remain for the Zephyrians to study. Doctor, what about the medical center? Her assistant asked. The alien patients in the hospital? Amanda paused. Human doctors and nurses ran the largest medical facility on the planet. Alien patients filled the beds, relying on human surgical techniques and medicines. Without human staff, many would die. We leave medical supplies for 7 days, she decided. After that, they'll have to figure it out themselves. Across the system, Chief Engineer Tony Martinez was supervising the shutdown of the main fusion reactor. The massive facility powered half the planet, and human engineers had been running it for 30 years. The Zephyrians had their own engineers, but they had never bothered to learn the complex systems. Sir, the Zephyrian plant manager is demanding to speak with you, one of his technicians reported. Tony walked to the communication panel. The alien's face appeared on the screen, his crystal features showing obvious panic. Engineer Martinez, you cannot shut down the reactor. The entire northern continent depends on this power. I'm not shutting it down, Tony replied calmly. I'm transferring control to your people. Your engineers can run it from now on. But they don't know how. The systems are too complex. Then they should have paid attention during the training sessions we offered, Tony said. We're leaving complete technical manuals and operating procedures. Good luck. He cut the connection and turned to his team. Finish the power transfer and pack up the portable equipment. The shuttles leave in 1 hour. On the military base outside the capital city, Commander Sarah Mitchell was overseeing the evacuation of the Galactic Defense Academy. Human instructors had trained 3 generations of alien officers at this facility. They had taught modern warfare tactics, advanced weapons systems, and fleet command strategies. The alien cadets watched in confusion as their human instructors loaded equipment onto transport ships. Many of these students had never seen combat. Their education was only half complete. Commander Mitchell, called out a young Corvin cadet, when will the human instructors return? I still need to complete my tactical training. Sarah looked at the young alien. He was a good student, eager to learn. Under different circumstances, she might have felt sorry for him. The human instructors won't be returning, she said simply. You'll have to find other teachers. But who will teach us fleet tactics? Who will show us how to coordinate multi-species battle groups? Sarah shouldered her equipment bag. That's not our problem anymore. The evacuation continued with military precision. Every human facility across Council space was being emptied simultaneously. Transport ships landed, loaded personnel and equipment, and departed within hours. The aliens could only watch as decades of human presence vanished before their eyes. Admiral Lisa Grant coordinated the entire operation from her command ship in orbit around Nexus Prime, the Council capital world. Her tactical display showed the progress at every location. So far, everything was proceeding perfectly. "Admiral, we're receiving desperate communications from Council governments," her communications officer reported. "They're demanding explanations, threatening legal action, offering to negotiate." "Ignore all of them," Lisa ordered. "This isn't a negotiation, it's a withdrawal." On Nexus Prime itself, the situation was becoming critical. The planet's main hospital was run entirely by human staff. Dr. Robert Taylor had been the chief medical officer for 8 years. Now he was packing his personal belongings while alien administrators begged him to stay. "Dr. Taylor, please reconsider," pleaded the hospital administrator, a nervous Centaurian named Clicks. "We have 3,000 patients in this facility. Our own doctors cannot perform the advanced surgeries." Robert continued packing. "Then you should have trained more doctors instead of relying on humans to do the difficult work." "But people will die." "Yes, they probably will," Robert agreed. "That's what happens when you don't invest in your own medical capabilities." He closed his bag and headed for the door. Behind him, Clicks was frantically calling for emergency meetings with the planetary government. The transportation networks were collapsing even faster than the medical systems. Human engineers had designed and maintained the maglev trains, the orbital elevators, and the cargo distribution systems on dozens of worlds. Now those same engineers were dismantling the control systems and taking the technical specifications with them. Engineer Maria Santos led the shutdown of the orbital elevator on Corvin Prime. The massive structure carried millions of tons of cargo between the planet's surface and orbital facilities every day. Without human maintenance, the system would fail within weeks. "Ma'am, the Corvin government is offering triple pay if we stay," one of her technicians reported. Maria laughed bitterly. "Triple pay? They couldn't even give us basic respect when we were here legally. Now they want to pay us?" Too late. She activated the final shutdown sequence. Warning lights flashed throughout the facility as critical systems went offline. The elevator would continue running on automatic for a few days, but without human oversight, it would inevitably break down. By the end of the second day, the magnitude of the evacuation was becoming clear. 60,000 human personnel had been extracted from Council space. Thousands of facilities had been shut down or transferred to alien control. The quantum communication network was already showing signs of strain as human technicians abandoned their posts. Captain Ryan Clark watched the last transport ship leave Zephyrian space. His tactical display showed similar scenes playing out across the galaxy. Everywhere humans had worked, lived, and served, they were disappearing. "Sir, incoming message from Fleet Admiral Grant," his communications officer announced. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired, but satisfied. "All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Grant. Phase 1 of the withdrawal is complete. All human personnel have been successfully evacuated from Council space. Phase 2 begins immediately. We are returning to Earth and the colonies. The galaxy will have to manage without us now." Ryan smiled as he gave the order for his fleet to jump to hyperspace. Behind them, the Zephyrian system was already going dark as power plants failed and communication networks collapsed. The aliens had always said humans were primitive and unreliable. Now they would have the chance to prove how much better they could do without human help. Somehow Ryan doubted they would succeed. 3 weeks after the last human ship disappeared into hyperspace, the first major crisis hit the Zephyrian homeworld. The northern continent's fusion reactor finally shut down completely, plunging 50 million crystal beings into darkness. Senator Linda Williams monitored the emergency broadcasts from her intelligence station in the Outer Rim colonies. The humans had established listening posts throughout the galaxy, and now those posts were providing valuable information about the chaos spreading through former Council space. "Ma'am, we're picking up distress signals from 12 different systems," her communications officer reported. "The Zephyrians are broadcasting on all emergency frequencies, begging for technical assistance." Linda nodded grimly. She had predicted this would happen, but seeing it unfold was still shocking. The Zephyrians had spent decades bragging about their superior intellect and advanced civilization. Now they couldn't even keep the lights on. Zephyrian Prime, Engineer Colthus, stood in the reactor control room, staring at displays that meant nothing to him. He was considered one of the best engineers of his species, but the human-designed systems might as well have been magic. Warning lights flashed constantly, and alarms blared throughout the facility. "Status report," demanded Plant Manager Veltar, the same council delegate who had dismissed human capabilities just weeks before. "The reactor is operating at 12% capacity," Colthus admitted. "The quantum stabilizers are failing, and I don't understand the containment protocols. The humans left technical manuals, but they're written in languages and concepts we don't fully comprehend." Veltar's crystal body dimmed with anger and fear. "Then learn. Our cities are going dark. Our people are dying from the cold." "It's not that simple," Colthus replied. "These systems required decades of training to understand. The humans offered to teach us many times, but we always said our own methods were sufficient." Outside the reactor facility, the Zephyrian capital city was descending into chaos. Without power, the climate control systems had failed. The crystal beings required specific temperature ranges to survive, and the natural environment was too cold for their physiology. Emergency shelters overflowed with refugees from the northern continent. The Zephyrian government had activated their military to maintain order, but even the military depended on human-trained officers and human-designed equipment. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On Corvin Prime, the orbital elevator had crashed into the planet's surface after a catastrophic system failure. The massive structure had carried millions of tons of cargo daily, connecting the surface to orbital manufacturing facilities. Now both the planet and the orbital stations were cut off from each other. General Thixkor of the Corvin Empire stood in his command center, watching reports stream in from across his territory. Pirate fleets were attacking merchant ships with impunity. The human peacekeeping forces that had protected trade routes for decades were gone, and the Corvin military was proving inadequate for the task. "How many ships have we lost this week?" he asked his aide. 47 merchant vessels, sir. The pirates are using human tactics and weapons they learned during joint training exercises. Our commanders don't know how to counter these strategies." Thixkor felt his forearms tremble with frustration. The Corvin military had ancient traditions of honor and single combat, but modern space warfare required coordination, technology, and tactical flexibility that his people had never developed. They had relied on human advisors to bridge that gap. What about our fleet commanders? Surely some of them learned from the human instructors. The ones who worked closely with humans are requesting permission to negotiate with the Human Federation, sir. They believe only human assistance can restore order to our trade routes. Dr. Nathan Cole sat in his hidden research facility, documenting the cascade failures across galactic civilization. As a former council advisor, he had predicted exactly this scenario, but even he was surprised by how quickly things were falling apart. His screens showed data from dozens of worlds. Medical systems were collapsing as alien doctors proved unable to perform advanced surgeries. Communication networks were fragmenting as quantum arrays failed without human maintenance. Transportation systems ground to a halt as complex automated controls broke down. The Centaurian Collective had lost contact with 15 of their colony worlds. The quantum communication network that connected their empire had developed critical failures, and their technicians couldn't repair the damage. Without instant communication, their carefully coordinated society was breaking apart. On the water world of Aqua Tertius, the situation was even worse. The Aquatic Coalition depended on humans to design their underwater cities and atmospheric processors. Now those systems were failing, and the Coalition's own engineers couldn't fix them. Ambassador Fluxwave floated in his command pool, receiving reports from across Coalition space. The artificial atmospheres that allowed different aquatic species to live together were becoming toxic. Population centers that had thrived for generations were being evacuated. How long before total system failure? He asked his chief engineer. 6 months, maybe less, came the reply. The atmospheric processors require constant adjustment. The humans understood the complex chemical interactions, but we never bothered to learn. We thought our simple filtration systems were adequate. Fluxwave realized with growing horror that his people faced extinction if they couldn't restore the atmospheric processors. The coalition had dismissed human technology as crude and overcomplicated. Now that same technology was the only thing keeping his people alive. The economic collapse was even more dramatic than the infrastructure failures. The Galactic Trade Federation had been built around human manufacturing capabilities and transportation networks. Human colonies produced more food than any other species, while human factories manufactured everything from simple tools to complex spacecraft. Trade routes that had operated for centuries suddenly had no cargo to carry. Worlds that had imported food faced starvation as human agricultural exports disappeared. Manufacturing centers shut down as supply chains collapsed without human coordination. The hegemony worlds were experiencing mass riots as unemployment soared, and basic goods became scarce. Their own industries had never developed beyond basic resource extraction because human manufacturers had provided everything else. Now their populations faced poverty and hunger. Emergency council sessions were called daily, but the delegates could do nothing but argue and blame each other. The communication network that allowed the council to function was breaking down, making coordination impossible. Veltar stood before what remained of the council assembly, his crystal body flickering weakly. We must send envoys to the human Federation immediately. We need their assistance to prevent total collapse. Absolutely not, snapped the Corvin representative. We cannot show weakness by begging for help from a primitive species. Primitive? Veltar laughed bitterly. Look around you. Our civilization is crumbling without them. How can you still call them primitive? The debate continued for hours, but no solutions emerged. Some delegates wanted to negotiate with humans immediately. Others preferred to try solving the problems themselves. A few suggested using military force to compel human cooperation. All of these discussions were academic because the Council could no longer communicate effectively with most of its member worlds. The quantum network that had connected the galaxy for centuries was fragmenting into isolated islands of communication. Dr. Foster's research had been the foundation of that network, but she was now working exclusively for human colonies. Her new quantum communication systems connected human worlds with unprecedented efficiency, while the former council territories slowly went silent. Senator Linda Williams compiled her final intelligence report of the week. The data showed a civilization in free fall, power grids failing, medical systems collapsing, communication networks fragmenting, trade routes under constant attack, governments losing control of their own territories. The species that had dismissed humans as too young and primitive to understand galactic governance were discovering that they themselves lacked the knowledge and skills to maintain the civilization they had inherited. 3 weeks after humanity's departure, the galaxy was learning a harsh lesson about the difference between taking credit for success and actually creating it. The humans had built the foundation that held everything together, and without that foundation, the entire structure was crumbling. The worst part was that this was only the beginning. 6 months after humanity's departure, the galaxy was dying. Prime Minister Helen Parker stood in the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching ships arrive from human colonies across the outer rim. Each ship brought refugees, intelligence, reports, and requests for assistance from alien governments that had once treated humans like servants. The irony was not lost on her. The same species that had voted against human representation in the Galactic Council were now begging for human intervention to save their crumbling civilizations. Ma'am, another delegation has arrived from the hegemony worlds, her aide announced. They're requesting immediate humanitarian assistance. Helen nodded but did not turn from the window. Outside, human construction ships were building new orbital platforms and defensive installations. The Human Federation was growing stronger every day while the rest of the galaxy fell apart. On the hegemony capital world of Regulus 7, civil war had erupted between competing factions. The insectoid population was starving because their agricultural systems had depended entirely on human-designed genetic modifications and farming techniques. Without human expertise, crop yields had fallen by 90%. Hive Lord Thixnar commanded what remained of the planetary government from his underground bunker. Above ground, his cities burned as desperate citizens fought over dwindling food supplies. His military had proved useless at maintaining order without human tactical support. Status report, he demanded from his surviving officers. The northern hives have declared independence, reported his aide. The eastern territories are controlled by food riots. We've lost contact with 12 provincial governors. Our own forces are deserting to join the rebel factions. Thixnar felt his compound eyes dim with despair. Just months ago, he had been a powerful leader in galactic politics. Now he could barely control his own planet. The hegemony had always been proud of their military strength, but that strength had come from human training and human weapons. What about our request to the Human Federation? No response, my lord. They acknowledged receipt of our message but have not agreed to any assistance. Chief Medical Officer Robert Taylor worked around the clock in his new hospital on Titan Base, treating a steady stream of alien refugees. Word had spread that human medical facilities would treat anyone who could reach them, and desperate beings were arriving from across the galaxy. The medical cases were heartbreaking. Zephyrian children, suffering from crystal rot because their doctors couldn't synthesize the medications that human physicians had developed. Corvan soldiers with infected wounds because their military medics lacked proper surgical training. Centaurian civilians with radiation poisoning because their environmental systems had failed. Doctor, the Centaurian ambassador is here again, his nurse informed him. She's waiting in conference room 3. Robert finished treating a young Aquatic Coalition refugee and headed to the meeting. Ambassador Kelu Nos floated in a portable tank, her gill slits fluttering with obvious distress. Dr. Taylor, my people are dying, she said without preamble. The atmospheric processors are failing on 17 of our worlds. We need human engineers to repair them immediately. I'm sorry, Ambassador, Robert replied. Medical treatment is one thing, but technical assistance requires authorization from the Federation Council. You'll need to submit formal diplomatic requests. We have submitted requests, dozens of them, but your government demands conditions we cannot accept. Robert knew what those conditions were. The Human Federation required full acknowledgement of past mistreatment, reparations for damages, and restructuring of alien governments to include human representation. Most alien species found these terms humiliating. Then I'm afraid there's nothing I can do, Robert said gently. I can treat sick individuals, but I cannot repair entire planetary systems. Kelunas's translator conveyed her distress in a series of musical tones. Doctor, entire populations will die without those atmospheric processors. Surely human compassion means something. Human compassion is exactly why I'm treating refugees here, Robert answered. But human compassion was also ignored for 57 years while we served the Council. Actions have consequences, Ambassador. Engineer Maria Santos supervised the construction of humanity's new quantum communication network from her command center on Luna Base. The human network was already more advanced than anything the old Council had possessed, connecting human colonies across thousands of light years with perfect clarity. Meanwhile, the former Council territories were almost completely isolated. The old quantum network had suffered complete collapse when human technicians abandoned their posts. Most alien worlds could no longer communicate with their own governments, let alone coordinate responses to the mounting crises. Ma'am, we're intercepting desperate signals from isolated alien colonies, her communications officer reported. Some of them haven't had contact with their home worlds for months. Maria studied the tactical display showing communication patterns across the galaxy. The human network appeared as a bright web of interconnected nodes, while the former council space was mostly dark. Only a few primitive radio signals still functioned in alien territory. Any responses to our technical assistance offers? She asked. The same as always. They want our help, but refuse to accept our terms. They keep insisting that they should receive assistance simply because they need it. Maria laughed without humor. 57 years of treating us like second-class citizens, and they still think they deserve our help for free. The military situation was even worse than the civilian catastrophes. Admiral Lisa Grant received intelligence reports daily about the complete breakdown of galactic security. Pirate fleets operated openly in what had once been heavily patrolled space. The Corvan Empire was expanding aggressively into territories left defenseless by the Council's collapse. Admiral, the Zephyrian government is offering us exclusive mining rights to their crystal fields in exchange for military protection, reported her intelligence chief. What about political reform? Lisa asked. They refuse to discuss changes to their government structure. They want military assistance, without acknowledging their past behavior toward humans. Lisa marked another rejection on her diplomatic status board. Dozens of alien governments were making similar offers, trying to buy human assistance with resources and trade deals. All of them refused the political reforms that would prevent future discrimination against humans. The most dramatic collapse was happening in the core systems around Nexus Prime. The former Council capital world was experiencing complete social breakdown as its population realized their government could no longer function. Veltar huddled in his private residence, watching news broadcasts that showed his crystal cities going dark one by one. The fusion reactors were failing across the planet, and no amount of Zephyrian engineering could restart them. The technical manuals left by human engineers might as well have been written in an alien language. His personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from the Human Federation. Veltar activated the display with trembling appendages, hoping for news of assistance. The message was from Ambassador Jake Morrison, the same human he had dismissed as primitive just months ago. Veltar, I have reviewed your requests for emergency assistance. The Human Federation is prepared to dispatch engineering teams to restore your power grid and medical facilities. In exchange, we require formal acknowledgement of the Galactic Council's discriminatory treatment of humanity, full reparations for economic damages, and restructuring of Zephyrian government to include permanent human representation with veto, power over future policies. Veltar's crystal body flickered with rage and desperation. The terms were humiliating, but his people were dying. Pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. Additionally, the message continued, all human assistance will be conditional on Zephyrian acceptance of human oversight for critical infrastructure. Your people have demonstrated that they cannot maintain these systems independently. The communication ended, leaving Veltar alone with an impossible choice. Accept human terms and survive as a subordinate species, or maintain Zephyrian independence and watch his civilization die. Across the galaxy, leaders of every major species faced the same terrible decision. The humans were no longer asking to be equals. They were offering to be masters, and for most alien worlds, that was starting to look like the only choice left. 2 years after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, the galaxy had become an entirely different place. President Kevin Moore stood before the Human Federation Assembly on New Washington, preparing to address the most important session in human history. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from hundreds of human colonies that had grown and prospered while the rest of the galaxy collapsed. Outside the windows, the skyline of New Washington stretched toward the horizon, a monument to human achievement and independence. Fellow citizens, Kevin began, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Today we decide the future of galactic civilization. The former council species have submitted their final proposals for reconciliation. The question before us is simple. Do we accept their surrender? Admiral Lisa Grant sat in the military section, reviewing the tactical reports that told the story of humanity's complete victory. The Human Federation now controlled the most powerful fleet in known space, while the former council worlds could barely maintain orbital defense platforms. 3 months ago, the Zephyrian government had formally surrendered, accepting every human demand in exchange for emergency assistance. Human engineers now controlled every major fusion reactor in Zephyrian space. Human doctors ran their hospitals. Human administrators oversaw their government functions. Admiral, status report on the former council territories, President Moore requested. Lisa stood and activated the main display. A star map appeared showing the galaxy divided into distinct regions. The human territories glowed bright blue, connected by the Advanced Quantum Communication Network. The former council space appeared mostly red, indicating systems under human control or protection. Mr. President, as of today, 47 alien governments have accepted our terms for assistance. They have acknowledged their past discrimination against humanity, agreed to pay reparations, and restructured their governments to include human oversight. 15 governments continue to refuse our conditions. And what is the status of those holdout governments? Complete societal collapse, sir. The Corvan Empire has fractured into 12 separate factions fighting a civil war. The hegemony central government has fallen, and their worlds are ruled by local warlords. The Aquatic Coalition has lost contact with most of their colonies. Kevin nodded grimly. The transformation had been more complete than anyone had imagined possible. Species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years were now dependent on human assistance for basic survival. Captain Jake Morrison, the former ambassador who had started this entire process, now commanded the exploration vessel Horizon. He stood on the bridge watching his crew prepare for departure to an uncharted region of space. Humanity was no longer interested in the old galaxy. They were building a new one. Captain, we're receiving another message from the Centaurian government, his communications officer reported. They're offering to cede 3 star systems to the Federation in exchange for atmospheric processor repair teams. Jake smiled but shook his head. Tell them the same thing we've told them for 6 months. Complete political restructuring first, then we'll consider assistance. The Centaurians had been among the most stubborn holdouts. Their collective government structure made it difficult for them to accept human oversight, but their resistance was weakening as more worlds went dark. Dr. Amanda Foster worked in her new laboratory on Titan Base, developing medical technologies that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Her quantum healing techniques, once dismissed as primitive by alien scientists, were now saving millions of lives across human space. More importantly, she was training a new generation of human scientists and doctors who would never accept second-class status. The children growing up in the Federation would know they belonged to the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Doctor, the Medical Refugee Center is requesting your assistance, her assistant announced. They have cases that local doctors cannot handle. Amanda nodded. The refugee centers had become a powerful symbol of the new reality. Aliens who had once looked down on humans now waited in line for human medical care. Their own doctors, trained in inferior alien techniques, could not provide the same level of treatment. Engineer Tony Martinez supervised the final phase of constructing the new galactic infrastructure. Human-designed fusion reactors powered growing colonies throughout Federation space. Human-built communication networks connected worlds across thousands of light years. Human agricultural systems fed populations that had never known hunger. Most significantly, humans were making first contact with species that had never been part of the old council. In the outer rim, beyond the reach of the former galactic government, dozens of civilizations were eager to form partnerships with the powerful Human Federation. Sir, the exploration ships have discovered 3 more spacefaring species in Sector 12, his engineering chief reported. All of them are requesting trade agreements with the Federation. Tony marked the new contacts on his development map. The human sphere of influence was expanding rapidly as word spread about Federation prosperity and protection. Soon, humanity would control more territory than the old council had ever ruled. General Patricia Hayes commanded the Federation Defense Forces from her headquarters on Mars Station. Her job had become easier as human military superiority became undeniable. The ragtag fleets of the former Council worlds posed no threat to human colonies. General, intelligence reports indicate that the Corvin resistance movement is planning an attack on our trade routes, her aide informed her. Patricia laughed. With what ships? We destroyed their fleet construction capabilities when they refused our assistance offers. Let them try to attack us with museum pieces and salvaged equipment. A big so. Military balance had shifted so completely that alien governments could not even consider using force against humans. Every war college in the galaxy had been run by human instructors, and those instructors had taken their knowledge with them when they left. In the old council chambers on Nexus Prime, Veltar sat alone in the empty hall. The great assembly that had once governed the galaxy was now a tomb. Most of the alien governments could no longer afford to send representatives, and those that could had nothing meaningful to discuss. His personal communicator displayed the final human ultimatum. The Federation had grown tired of waiting for holdout governments to accept reality. Any species that had not submitted to human oversight within 30 days would be declared hostile and cut off from all Federation trade and assistance. For Veltar and his people, this meant certain death. The Zephyrian government had already collapsed, and only emergency Federation aid was keeping the population alive. Without human assistance, billions would die within months. He activated his communicator and sent a message to President Moore. The words were bitter in his mind, but survival left no room for pride. Mr. President, the Zephyrian Collective formally accepts all Federation terms for assistance and partnership. We acknowledge our past errors in judgment regarding human capabilities. We request immediate integration into the Federation Protectorate system. Similar messages were being sent from the few surviving alien governments. The galaxy was finally learning what humans had tried to teach them 57 years ago. Partnership required mutual respect, and respect could not be demanded, only earned. President Kevin Moore concluded his address to the Federation Assembly with words that would be remembered for generations. The old galaxy was built on inequality and discrimination. Species were ranked by age and supposed sophistication rather than contribution and merit. That galaxy is dead. We have built something better. He gestured toward the star map showing human territory stretching across thousands of worlds. The new galaxy will be based on a simple principle. Those who contribute are valued, and those who do not contribute are irrelevant. Humanity tried to be partners in the old system. Now we are the system. The assembly erupted in applause as representatives voted to accept the remaining alien governments as Federation protectorates. The transformation was complete. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through military force. They had simply made themselves indispensable, then walked away when their value was not appreciated. The species that had once called humans primitive now survived only through human mercy. The galaxy had learned too late that true power came not from ancient heritage or supposed superiority, but from the ability to build, maintain, and improve the foundations of civilization. Humanity had spent 57 years proving their worth to species that refused to see it. Now those same species would spend generations proving their worth to humanity. Dr. Elena Vasquez recovered from her ordeal, but her rescue had come at the cost of galactic stability. She established a foundation to help other survivors of Zephyrian experimentation, funded by reparations taken from the former Empire's treasury. But she also served as a living reminder of what happened when evil was allowed to flourish unchecked. Elena often stood at the memorial on Liberation Prime, looking at the names of beings who had died in the processing centers. She knew that. Their deaths had not been in vain. The galaxy would never forget the price of ignoring human warnings. The SOS that had awakened the human fleet had indeed doomed the Zephyrian Empire, but it had also changed everything else. In the end, the galaxy had asked for salvation and received it. Whether they would survive their saviors remained to be seen. Humanity was awake, R.